Hello, hello. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Eddie Live podcast, episode number 270. I am here with Michelle Bradley. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you, Eddie?
Thank you. I didn't know you had to make such a long trip to get here. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's always great to come here and be in Tianmu also.
Yes, you were mentioning that you had spent some time in Tianmu before, yeah?
Yeah, it's the first place I lived when I came to Taiwan, and I was working down the street at Space Yoga.
Okay.
So it's nice to be back in the neighborhood.
That's cool. The cool thing about here is, it's a pretty expat heavy area.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why we're here. The restaurant is here, so. Yeah, beautiful. So maybe before we dive in, you can maybe introduce yourself a little bit before we dive deep into it.
Sure. I'm Michelle, and I have an American father and a South African mother, so I grew up in both of those places. And I've been living in Taiwan for 17 years now.
Nice.
So I've actually lived in Taiwan longer than anywhere else. So
Okay.
I feel like it's, part of my identity now.
Yeah.
And I live in Xindian.
Okay.
I travel a lot for business, and my work is involved with consulting and coaching groups and individuals on a variety of soft skills.
Sure.
For example, intercultural communication, growth mindset, emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
and applying sort of cultural intelligence to global communication.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I think that's such a great topic, and it's a topic that I didn't really know existed, and I was telling you a story about my mother and my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that needs to be here. So how did you get maybe involved in something like that? I mean, you were saying South Africa, right, and
Yeah.
New York. Tell me a little bit about how you got interested in that.
Yeah, so I guess I always had this sense ever since I was a child of adapting to the situation.
Okay.
For example, my accent, like if I'm in the US, people will ask me where I'm from.
Okay,
And
really?
if I'm in South Africa, people always also ask me where I'm from. I tend to kind of flex the American accent when I'm in Taiwan more. But if I go back to South
Sure.
Africa,
Okay.
it changes. So there was that kind of cultural awareness of sort of underlying expectations and behavior.
Okay.
But that was just normal to me.
Yeah.
And then when I finished university in the US, my first job was actually doing research and sales for a startup that was helping expats, American expats, for example, move from the US to Saudi Arabia or
Okay,
the
wow.
US to China or wherever. And I was helping prepare the material. So I got into intercultural communication training kind of right from the beginning. Then kind of after that, I did a lot of other things.
Okay.
And then when I was in Taiwan, so the reason why I came to Taiwan originally was because Space Yoga was looking for yoga teachers, and at that time, that was my main profession.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I just had this kind of dream. I'd just been doing like a training in India, and I was like, oh, it would be my dream to stay in Asia and teach yoga. And
Okay.
it sounded really, like that. It sounded very dreamy, but
No, that's great. Okay. Yeah.
I tried to do the research, and there was a job opening here. And I came here, and then after a couple of years, I kind of became friends with Taiwanese clients, and I just kind of got the feeling that when they asked me for help, like for example, oh, my husband's going next week to the US, and he needs to give a presentation or he needs to negotiate, could you maybe help him, give him some advice on his English?
Okay.
So I was in all these situations outside of the yoga room where there was a huge focus on English language being the key or kind of like the most important thing for
Okay.
success.
Sure.
But then along the way, I realized that there was actually all these cultural elements that impacted successful communication, not just, the correct, perfect past participle or whatever the grammar
Oh gosh,
is.
yes. When I had to teach stuff like that, I was like, I don't know, just talk, just enjoy yourself, It was crazy. Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
So I think a lot of us have met that along the way in
Yeah,
Taiwan, right?
for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so but the thing you just mentioned, like just talk, just kind of be natural. That's also cultural format that we're used to.
Okay.
So, like, I came in and you were like, "Hey, how are you?" And we had some small talk, right?
Yeah.
But I noticed that, for example, here in Taiwan, it's still relationship oriented, but there's not that small talk buffer when you immediately meet someone. Usually, people will focus on a practicality,
Yeah.
like "Have you eaten?" or
Yeah.
chat more about like the dynamics of what's about to happen or how to organize it. So small talk tends to be a very challenging issue for a lot of Taiwanese going abroad or working with foreign coworkers, but it's not actually about the English. It's more about the mindset about what successful communication looks like.
Yeah, that's okay. No problem. You're good. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree 100% because I've been here for around 20 years, and so about half my life as well. And I also feel quite Taiwanese. I have the APRC or whatever, but hopefully we'll get the ID eventually. But yeah, no, I also feel it. So now when I go back to Canada, and I come from a really small town in Canada, I go to visit my family. And my family's great. My family's Mexican, and so I'm first generation Canadian.
Okay.
And so we grew up kind of with that buffet sort of, the Canadian culture and the Mexican culture. But yeah, now feeling I think more Taiwanese than the other two, it's quite weird going back and having the reverse culture shock a little bit.
For sure. Yeah. So like, what do you notice?
Like for example, when me and my wife and my daughter go out, there's always it's kind of Taiwanese style where there's a bunch of dishes and everyone has a little bowl or a little plate and everyone kind of picks at it and just fills up their stuff, or you serve everybody, but everybody's eating from everything. Whereas in Canada, when you go out to eat, you order your meal and that's your meal. No one's going to be like picking at your food. So when we did that the last time we went, my family's kind of like, what's going on? Are you guys okay? Why is she eating your food? You guys need money or something? I'm like, no. That's what everybody does. Everybody just kind of, you go out and everybody shares everything. Like beer.
Yeah.
For example, the first time I went to like a Kuaitao, I was with Taiwanese friends and, you order your beers or whatever, and they're big bottles, right? And I was just like a dumb Western. I just kind of, they open it up and I just kind of grabbed the big bottle and I was kind of just drinking the big bottle and everybody had those little glasses and, everybody just kind of does like shots of beer, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just drinking, my big bottle, kind of thinking like, that's weird. But now I would never think of doing that. And if I were to see somebody grab the big bottle and drink it, I would also think that's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's a couple of the things that I can think of. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's just like the small things that you notice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, if you take a look at that, it's kind of connected from an intercultural communication perspective.
Okay.
Some cultures may influence individuals, may emphasize individuals, where others may emphasize group identity more.
Okay.
So if you come from a group identity culture, then the decisions you make will factor in like what other people want or like how other people will feel about it.
Okay.
So Taiwan traditionally is considered quite highly relationship oriented.
Okay.
Although the younger generation is moving more towards the individual side. But then like Canada, the US is much more individual.
Yeah.
However, Mexico is actually more towards
Mexico's
the relationship.
That's right. Yeah. So Mexico is similar to Taiwan. So the funny thing is when I have this conversation with a lot of my like Western friends, Canadian, American, even like Australian, they had the culture shock coming here. I actually didn't have much of a culture shock coming here because we would go to Mexico almost every summer. And Mexico it's similar to here, like the night markets and the big family events and just you barbecue on the street and stuff. I thought it was really similar, and I love night markets. I love food.
Okay.
Obviously, with the restaurant, right? So I think that for me, it's really similar. For me, Taiwan is kind of the best of both worlds, the kind of the best parts of Mexico and the best parts of Canada. So for me, coming here, I love it. It's a great place. Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. So you kind of already had that sort of some of the societal expectations ingrained in you, so it must be easier.
Yeah, like if I would go to again food, right? If I go to a restaurant and you get like you order the intestines or something, right?
Yeah.
Which is very common in Taiwan.
Yeah.
They would look at me and they're like, "Oh, foreigners don't eat that." I'm like, well, but in Mexico we eat that. So just little things like that. They're kind of like, oh, you look foreign, but you don't look. You kind of everybody's like, where are you from? And it's kind of a unique. It's a funny situation for sure. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I've been working with a Danish company recently on a project, and they help Danish people understand more about how to adjust their behavior when they go abroad.
Okay.
And I've been helping to create like country profiles by coordinating with country experts.
Nice.
So since the beginning of the year, I've been in contact with people from Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Denmark, the U.S., South Africa, Brazil, all over the world.
Okay.
And I guess like as a Westerner, whether it's my South African or American heritage, it's both very Anglo.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
because my South African ancestry is from Britain.
Okay.
But if you look at most of the profiles that I got, actually a lot of the world sort of responds and interacts in a very similar way. Like it is more group oriented, and people do really care about relationships,
Yeah.
and people do try to maintain face. Whereas in the countries that I originally come from, it's a little bit actually more unique.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. For me, having Mexican heritage and coming here, and having the like Chinese New Year dinner, stuff like that,
Excuse
right?
me,
No
my cough.
problem. No problem. Do your thing. You're
Go
good.
ahead.
Okay. We have sort of the Chinese New Year. It's okay. Do you need your water? You good?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can keep it here. It's okay.
Yeah, sorry. I led
No
like
problem.
a really long workshop yesterday, so when I talk
Oh.
all day, then my throat tends to get dry.
Sorry to make you talk so much again.
No,
Yeah.
it's okay.
No, so basically the Mexican culture is similar to the Taiwanese culture, but like for example, if you go to our house in Canada with a Mexican family, everyone takes their shoes off,
Okay.
and that's supposed to be. Everyone says it's very Taiwanese, but me coming here thinking we always take our shoes off because it's respectful and because you don't want to get someone's house dirty,
That's
right?
right.
So it was when I came, a lot of the stuff here was it's very similar. I like the night markets and I don't know, just people. The difference is I think Mexican people are very friendly. Taiwanese people are very friendly. But something like the safety is amazing here, of course, right?
Sure.
Whereas like Canada's very safe. People, I don't want to say they're not friendly, but it's a very different sort of when you meet someone, it's kind of like, hello, how are you? But Mexicans would be like, hey, get a beer. Did you eat? And they're serving you food. And Taiwanese people are the same. They're kind of like, they're offering you food. You don't know them. So it was pretty cool for me to have a little bit of both, up in the upbringing and then coming here and people ask me why I like it so much, and I don't know, it's kind of the best of both for me.
That is great. And
Yeah.
it also must kind of also make you feel sort of closer to your wife's family too.
For sure. Yeah. So it's so Mexican families obviously are very close, but I've been here for a long time, and so we're quite close with my wife's family, and it's also weird going back to my own family because I'm here with my my in-laws live in Miaoli, and so we go visit them, and they come here to visit here, and they come to eat, and they love the place, but it's weird that I'm I wouldn't say closer, but I see them more than I
Okay.
see my own family.
Yeah.
So it's kind of when I go back to see my family, it's great. There's a little bit of like, it's a little awkward for a few seconds, and then your mom gives you a hug, and it's fine, right? But you're kind of like, oh, it's a weird situation, living overseas and living so far away from family. With COVID, there was a time where we didn't go back for like 6 years or something. It's just
Yeah.
a long time.
It is.
To not see mom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really a long time. So do you think living in Asia for 19 years,
Yeah.
how do you think that's influenced like your perspective on life, saying, you came from, a more Anglo background
Yeah.
and then till now?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's an interesting question, right? Because there's no like those movies when they show like if she took this path or if she took this path,
Yeah,
and they
like
can
the
show the
fork.
difference,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So I have no idea what my life would have been like if I'd stayed, but I can say that a lot of habits related to Taiwanese culture, or the way people sort of treat each other here, or the idea of sort of although this is like my human life,
Yeah.
the way I behave also impacts the people around me.
Okay.
I have a much stronger sense of that now than I probably did if I had kept on staying in like the U.S. or in any other place in the Western world where I
really?
grew up.
Okay.
I think there's more of a sense of shared responsibility here.
Okay.
And I know, like, for some of my Taiwanese friends who've lived abroad, they sometimes see it as a little bit of a burden because when they go to the West, like to the UK or US, whatever, or Canada, they feel a sense of freedom because they can just feel like they only have to take responsibility for themselves. And there's not so much like family
Sure.
pressure. But I guess maybe because I am a foreigner, I have the best of both worlds here.
Yeah.
I don't have that, sort of expectations like you have to get married, you have to have kids, all that stuff. So my parents are pretty like easygoing and laid back. But I do like the sense of that people care about like the tone of voice that they use when they're out and, asking about each other and things like that. So I think that's had a huge impact on many aspects of my behavior.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that, living here, learning sort of the culture and then learning the language,
Yeah.
right? I think a lot of friends that I have here, Western, like American, Canadian friends, they don't speak the language. And then a lot of my friends, they do speak the language. And I think that the ones that do, they really get, into the culture, into Taiwan. I think they connect more.
Yeah.
I mean, so what do you think? I mean, a lot of people think, oh, you don't need to learn it. Everyone speaks English.
Yeah.
But for me, I know that growing up in Canada, I had a lot of aunts and uncles who, lived there for a long time, and they didn't, they spoke English, but it was not great English.
Okay.
And also, a lot of my best friends in my small hometown are Portuguese.
Oh.
Is a very random high Portuguese population there, and also
Interesting.
their family didn't really speak English as well.
Okay.
So I thought if I'm going to stay, I really have to make the effort to learn
That's
at
great.
least decent amount of it. So, what do you think about the language connection and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it is true. Like, especially if you live in this neighborhood, I think it is
Yeah.
okay to just speak English. Like,
Yeah.
it's much easier just to speak English in Taiwan than it is in Japan, for example.
Yeah.
However, I'm so glad I invested in the long-term effort that it took
Yeah.
to study Chinese. It really is like a commitment,
Yeah.
and it's an ongoing commitment. Because I can say that the job opportunities, the relationships, actually, basically, like my whole life would be totally different if I hadn't learned Chinese.
I agree. Yeah.
A lot of the work I do now is actually the main language that I'm using is Chinese. So
Amazing.
and also, besides that, it's an insight into a whole different way of sort of constructing words.
Yeah.
And even sometimes when you translate something from Chinese to English or English to Chinese, the feeling of it is very different.
Yeah.
So you can really kind of express yourself in a more accurate way. I think if you maintain speaking English here, you're probably at like a 70% level of communication. And then even if your Chinese isn't perfect, you're slowly moving towards like 80, 90,
Yeah.
hopefully to 100.
Yeah, I think 70 is about right because I have friends that we would go out and I haven't gone in a long time, but before I was married and stuff,
Yeah.
they people would say, oh, does anybody speak? It's all foreigners. Does anybody speak English? And everybody would just point at me, and I would kind of be the unofficial translator and
Speak Chinese.
Yeah, speaking Chinese, and it's pretty cool. I enjoy it, and I think that when I came, they told everybody would say, you speak English and Spanish, so learning the third language is going to be really easy. Neither of those two help with Chinese, not at all.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Japan. We went a few years ago, and for me, speaking English, Spanish, and Mandarin, that's pretty. Not the whole world, but it's pretty good to cover most of the planet, right? But going to Japan and using the three of them, and all three being almost useless, it's so frustrating because you feel like Taiwan day one guy where you're pointing, like, oh, this, no, this. It's kind of. It's humbling for sure because you feel like, oh, I can speak Mandarin, and you order and talk whatever. But yeah, it's kind of a funny thing. Yeah, Japan is beautiful. I love it as well.
Yeah, but it's definitely it's its own world, right?
Definitely, yeah. It's so close, but so far, right?
Yeah.
So if someone were to ask you, what would be like a definition for cultural EQ? Because that's a term that I didn't really hear of very often until you. So maybe, what would you answer to that?
Sure. Well, I kind of put it together, and the reason why I did was because I feel like if you really want to thrive in any multicultural environment, you need 3 Qs. So you need 3 skill sets. The first one is IQ, which is, you know, most people we're communicating with have a certain level of IQ.
Yep.
Then you have the emotional intelligence, the EQ, which is very important. But if you have a really high EQ in your home environment, like whether it's with your Mexican family or in Canada, a lot of those sort of social cues have been learned by what's acceptable, the norms in that culture.
Oh, yeah.
So it's very important to have that. But you know what's considered high EQ in, for example, Mexico may not be the same as in Japan.
Yeah.
So that's why, in addition to the EQ, you need the CQ, which is cultural intelligence. And cultural intelligence is the ability to adapt to any situation you're in, not necessarily being an expert in a culture, but having the ability to kind of read the room and stand in the other person's shoes and ask open-ended questions, be curious, be flexible. So the idea of having cultural EQ is basically putting the best of emotional and cultural intelligence together, which allows you to basically communicate with anybody.
Yeah, I think that's really cool because I believe, you know, I've traveled a little bit and, you know, having the Mexican, Canadian and living in Taiwan, there's a lot of differences in the culture and a lot of stuff that's acceptable, you know, in one is not in the other, right? So, you know, like for example, in this area, we have quite a few like Mexican and Latino customers, and a lot of them, they work at embassies and stuff like that, and they're kind of like high-level employees and stuff like that. But the Spanish that I learned in Mexico is how can I say? It's kind of it's quite a ghetto Spanish, you know. So my cousins and my uncles, you know, everyone will play soccer. You know, they'll drink beer and eat and stuff, and all it is just kind of making fun of each other. But that's just kind of how they show you that they love you, like, oh, you suck, you blah, 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 right? and so, but I can't use that here because I have to keep a very, very strong filter on my Spanish when I meet, you know, a new customer. Oh, here's the new head of this embassy or that embassy. I can't say something like that, right? Everybody swears so much in my family in Mexico. So it's very different. And then in Canada, it's I don't want to say it's colder, but it's very like formal and direct, right? So it's kind of like, you know, say this if you mean it, you know. There are still like the ribbing and stuff, but it's not so much.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love that you're kind of switching between different worlds, even within the Spanish-speaking community.
There's like, for example, in Mexico, you know, when people would, for example, say something like, you know, long live, you know, Mexico, right?
Yeah.
They'll say, you know, Viva Mexico, cabrones, right? But cabrón is like a bad word.
That's right.
But in Mexico, it's like there's license plates with it, and it's kind of like, it's just a saying that everybody says. But if you say that, I think I said it around a Colombian friend or something, and they were just like, whoa. Why are you calling me, you know, an a-hole type deal? And I'm like, what? It's just kind of like, whoa, that's not what I'm saying. So definitely even within that community, very different. And recently I have some Brazilian friends as well, and they were talking about how, again, in the Latin culture, you know, you see someone, you give them a hug, you give them a kiss, and then in Taiwan, if you try to give someone a hug, they're like, whoa, why are you touching me? So there's so many examples in my situation. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so Elephant Communications, tell me about that. What inspired you to start that, the Elephant Communications?
Yeah, so maybe like 3 or 4 years before COVID, I was like, okay, let's make this work. You know, I'm going to find a way to start leading classes and leading workshops on cultural intelligence and how to apply it in global business mostly, like for people doing work abroad or with foreigners in Taiwan.
Okay.
And I met up with a Taiwanese guy who'd recently graduated from Taipei, and he kind of had this idea of setting up theme-based classes for adults that have already like a intermediate to advanced level of English. Okay. And I was like, okay, so I really like your business model. So I really want to do this intercultural communication stuff. So can we collaborate? So it really took off. And, you know, these really interesting people who were coming in, like Taiwanese who were about to study abroad, or Taiwanese who were working in government, or just they all had a reason why they wanted to understand how to communicate on a global level better. And I was so inspired by it that I was like, okay, so let me continue this. So I went back and I did like my training with the European Institute for Intercultural Development.
Wow.
And then also in Canada, I did a certification on emotional intelligence.
Wow.
And I was learning so much and putting into practice. And I thought, okay, so I'm originally from, besides the US, like I have this African heritage from South Africa. And then now I'm in Asia. And my favorite animals are elephants.
Okay.
And the reason why I love elephants is because they hold so much wisdom, but also like a great amount of empathy. And the way that they communicate in groups is so amazing. Like, well, I won't go into details about that, but I thought I want to create an organization that kind of embodies the spirit of how elephants communicate.
Okay.
So that's why I called it Elephant Communications.
Okay.
And over the last couple of years, yeah, it's been going great. I'd say half of my work is for groups, and then the other half is one-on-one, like coaching.
Okay.
So it's basically coaching and then workshop facilitation and then some consultancy work.
Okay.
And Elephant Communications kind of came at a really cool time in the world, although COVID was unfortunate in many ways.
Yeah.
There's always like a silver lining in every cloud, right?
For sure. Yeah.
And my silver lining was that everything is so global now.
Yeah.
So I can, I have a permanent residency in Taiwan.
Amazing.
Taiwan's my home, but I communicate with people from all over the world, like at least 10 countries a week.
Wow.
I'm working with organizations, as I mentioned, in Denmark, US, UK. I'm going to the US next week for business.
Okay.
But a lot of it is connected to Taiwan and Taiwanese culture.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that has helped me with the restaurant is you were talking about like elephant, and I feel sometimes kind of like a chameleon. Like sometimes you will come in. So one of the best restaurant experiences I had, I was in college. I took my girlfriend there to this Italian restaurant, and small restaurant. We didn't know it was a high-end place, and everybody has their food, and then the chef comes out and he sits down, chats with everybody. And I thought, well, we're just some broke college kids. He's not gonna even talk to us. But this older guy, chef hat and everything, like very, very stereotypical chef. He comes out and he starts talking to us, and he's like, "This is what I do with the food," and he asked us about us, and it was really a great experience.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, if I ever do anything, like a business or anything like that, and I never even thought about this, I would like to make people feel like that. So same thing, when people come in here, I try to chat with everybody. I try to say hello, and most people they want to chat. Taiwanese people, doesn't matter from where, Mexican, Western, usually want to chat. Sometimes they don't want to chat, and then you get that kind of the vibe, and then you're like, okay, well, enjoy your meal.
Yeah.
But we try to make sure that everybody's having a good time, and I feel like similar, where you have to be kind of like this chameleon, where this guy comes in and you're speaking Spanish with this guy, then you speak English with the guy at the bar, and then you speak Chinese with the Taiwanese person there, and try to make everybody feel like welcome. So I think it's really a really cool thing what you're doing, because I didn't know that that I knew that it was important, but I didn't know how important.
Okay.
Because I meet people again from all over the world. They come to eat and come to have a drink or whatever and share their story. And it's funny how we think, for example, like an American would be direct, but then if you meet like a German, that's like ultra direct,
That's
right?
right.
So it's like, whoa, it's really cool how you'll meet like a German, and they'll just kind of say something to you, where some people would think, oh, this person's rude,
Yeah.
but actually he's just being German, and that's how
right.
Germans talk.
Yeah.
Because I also have some German friends, so it's kind of really cool how what you're doing. I think is fantastic.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe one of the reasons why you're not so familiar with this is because it sounds like you're already doing it naturally.
Okay, wow.
So you didn't need to go and learn
Okay.
it, because it sounds like you got the EQ and the CQ going on.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I just thought that I know that, like, for example, Taiwanese are very shy usually,
Yeah.
right? Usually, even if they can speak, English well, they'll just say, "Oh, my English is poor" or something, and you have to be like, once they get to chatting, then they're actually quite chatty.
Yeah.
But there's a kind of like a shyness and like maybe not ask questions. Like I have Taiwanese staff, and we'll have a meeting, and I'm like, okay, cool. Does everybody get it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then any questions, and no one asks
Yeah,
any
that's right.
questions. Nobody asks any questions. And then somebody will go do something wrong. I'm like, oh, what's going on? We just talked about this, and they're like, oh, I didn't want to ask in front of everybody or
Yeah.
something like that. And I'm like, what? So it's very, it's funny because we have a mix of staff from, like, we have one guy here from Turkey, Philippines,
Oh.
Indonesia, of course, Taiwan.
cool.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. And again, one of the communication things that pops up is all of them, English is their second language
Okay.
or third language.
Yeah.
So there's always miscommunications that I got to come in and be like, no, everything's cool. My wife will be like, well, he's being this and that. Like, no, it's just everybody's second or third language. So it's a very unique thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a very special situation you got going on.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy one. But so, for example, how would you run how would you teach something like this? It's a very cool thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Like an etiquette. Like, let's say a Taiwanese person says, hey, I'm going to go to the U.S. Teach me a little bit about the culture. What would be kind of like the protocol for something like that? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Yeah.
The first thing is I think it's really important to get past stereotypes because,
Okay.
for every cultural stereotype, there's always the exception.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So it's a little bit more about beginning with developing self-awareness and understanding one's own relationship to one's culture. So, for example, if you're coming from Taiwan, you're going to the US, you may have a lot of emphasis placed on to understand the US, but most people won't spend a lot of time thinking about how do my communication styles or my personality affect how I'm going to react or how I'm going to integrate into
Okay.
US society.
Okay.
So I think if it's a one-on-one
Yeah.
such scenario, I think the first one is to sort of do like a emotional intelligence test, and then we
Okay.
can get some scores like about how you react to stress and how like extroverted or introverted you are, etc. How self-aware you are. So then we can use that as a framework. And then after there's been some more discussion about that, and then awareness of are there any behavior patterns that I would like to develop more, then we go on to kind of more the theory about 9 dimensions of culture, and we can map out like your own profile, the US profile, Taiwan's profile, and then any other cultures that might have influenced your background.
Okay.
So we talked about, for example, individual versus group, but there's many others. For example, are you more task-based in terms of how you proceed with work, or are you more relationship-based? And then also, like, are you more loose in your time framework? Like, you are very comfortable with multitasking, interruptions are normal, or are you more like linear, which would be considered tight?
Okay.
So, like, your perception of time and how to manage your time. Like, do you just want to clock in at 8:30 and leave at 4:30, or like, are you cool to kind of clock in at 8:30, have like a long lunch with coworkers, have like afternoon tea, and then kind of like leave late with everybody else? Sort of understanding all of these factors. So we divide it into basically how you see the world, how you think, and how you relate to others.
Wow. Okay.
So then after we kind of go through that, then we can understand more. We can basically map out any areas where your personality may be a little bit more, there may be some challenges when you move to the US. So then we'll focus on those areas, and then we can strategize on situations that may occur.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for example, I worked with one Taiwanese guy who moved, and he's been there for a year. So we've been working together for about 2 years. And a lot of the things that we talked about before he went to the US, he said, oh, Michelle, he said that to me recently. He said, at the time it just sounded like theory, and I was interested in it, but it sounded conceptual. But like now I've been working in this US company for a year, and I realized, like, oh my God, like this is really what's going on.
Yeah.
So he's able to kind of take what we did in preparation and now put it into practice.
Oh, great.
So like one thing that happened to him was he got feedback from his like midterm review that he lacks courage. And he felt like 很生气, right? He was like angry. He was
He's
like
insulted.
He's like insulted.
What?
He's like,
Yeah.
I moved my family from the Taiwan to the US. I sold my house. Like I changed my career. Like I'm speaking in my second language. How could someone say that I don't have enough courage? And so I said, let's take a look at what they mean. So I looked at the details of the feedback, and it was more about like sticking up for an opinion that might be controversial in a meeting, or disagreeing with your boss face to face, or being a little bit more proactive about engaging with coworkers at like a social event. And all of those things in Taiwan aren't really necessary in the workplace.
True.
And like disagreeing with someone openly in a meeting, in fact, is like not really a suggested behavior, because here it's more focused on harmony in the group. So doing all of those things for him, he feels like he's kind of being a bad student.
Okay.
So although he still has this feeling that he's kind of uncomfortable while he's doing it, he has the cultural awareness that this is what is expected of me. However, it doesn't mean that he's changing his personality.
Yeah.
Because he can still come back to Taiwan and then flex back.
Okay.
So it's kind of having that awareness and then being able to adjust yourself according to the situation.
Okay. That's really cool. One of the quick stories that just popped into my head. One of the culture shocks I had, there wasn't many. The one was weddings, Taiwanese weddings, right? Because you go to a wedding, it'll be like noon or 5 p.m.
Yeah.
You go and the hongbao, right?
Yeah.
You got to pay. You
Yeah.
got to pay. You're like, okay, you do the money thing, that's fine. And then in front of you, the ama or whoever will just rip it open and just kind of and write down how much you gave. And I'm just like, whoa, okay. Then you feel like awkward, like, oh, should I give more?
Yeah.
What did this guy give? What did that guy give? And then so they write it down, and then you go and you have your meal, and sometimes it's a chatty table, sometimes it's not, right? But at the end, the bride and the groom, they go around, they say hello, they have a shot or whatever with grape juice or wine. And at the end, they change 2 or 3 times, right? I think the woman changes 2 or 3 times. And then
Yeah.
at the end, it's like, all right, everyone get out. And you're like, what? I didn't even, no one had any drinks yet. There was, because a Mexican one
Yeah.
is just like, okay, you go in, you eat, everyone's, having a good time drinking. And the party doesn't stop till like 5 a.m., 4 a.m. Just there's no stop. And so in the Taiwanese one, it's like, all right,
We got the
8
room
o'clock,
till
8 p.m. We got the room
Yeah.
till 8. Everybody get out, and you're just like, whoa, it's kind of crazy. Yeah. So the first wedding I went to, I was actually surprised. We're like, whoa, because it was just shocking, because Mexican weddings or even Canadian weddings, everyone's having a good time. But in the Taiwanese one as well, but people will, that's it, time's up, get out. So that was a crazy one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think those types of situations will happen to all of us,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, I think I know what's going on, but then suddenly the behavior is just different to what I expect.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the golden moment. In that moment, it's surprising, it's shocking. So, how am I going to deal with this? Am I going to kind of judge, oh, like Taiwanese aren't fun, or Mexican weddings are better? Or am I going to have a more open mind? Like, oh, it's interesting. Like, why may that be? Or, oh, that's interesting. It's different, not weird. So I think that's the kind of mindset that it's the hidden things that we don't really expect to happen, even
Yeah.
if we've been somewhere for a while.
Yep.
And sort of the mindset about how we sort of adjust our behavior and our thoughts in that moment is kind of the key
Yes.
to cultural intelligence.
It's really
Yeah.
cool. I love that. And do you have any stories where you kind of came out that you're kind of like, oh my gosh, this is kind of blew you away a little bit? Thing way back in the beginning. That was a long time ago. The story I'm telling. Yeah. Is there anything you can think of like that? No.
Well, previous to Taiwan, I was an ALT in what we call the JET program, which is this Japanese exchange teaching program.
Oh, nice.
So I basically flew from New York City to the rice fields of Kyushu.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was living in a seaweed cultivating village.
Wow.
And I'd never lived in a small town in my life.
From New York.
Yes.
That's like the capital of the world.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up in New York and Cape Town, which are both like sort of
Yeah.
cities. And it was such a shock on so many levels. Just like the language, the culture, the expectations for work, everything. That by the time I came to Taipei, I was like, I'm
no
good.
problem. Yeah, you're good. You did the crash course already.
Yeah, yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
But of course, like over the years, there are small things. Even now, like I think the more you learn Chinese, and then the more you use it for work, the deeper you go. And then I'm not sure if you've noticed, like if you're speaking English and you're definitely like a just arrived foreigner, Taiwanese kind of treat you in one way.
Yeah.
But when you cross the line, you can speak Taiwanese, and they can kind of observe from your nonverbals that you know what's going on.
Yeah.
They kind of have they treat you differently.
For sure.
And there's like a higher expectation. So
for sure.
so
yeah.
as that expectation gets kind of higher, I keep on like learning more.
Keep learning more. That's funny because for me too, like my in-laws, they don't speak English, so I speak Mandarin with them.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's great. Sometimes they'll be having like a family conversation about how somebody swindled somebody, and then they'll kind of look at me and ask me want my input, and I'm like, I don't want to be involved. I don't even know who this person is. I'm just like, don't include me on this. I have no idea. So they're kind of like, well, I remember this one time we went, and none of my wife's family drinks, but because foreigners drink, the first time I went, before we were married, they had prepared this bottle of what's the, I can't remember what's a bottle of alcohol, but
Okay.
what's that one that everybody, I can't remember.
Oh,
anyway.
that white bar, that
Yeah,
white.
I can't
what is
remember
it
the
called?
name, yeah.
I also forgot.
Yeah,
You're like,
I'm
look at this
drawing
two
a blank
foreigners who've
right
been
now.
here forever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so they had that, and then they were pouring it. I'm like, okay, I'll have some because it's rude in my culture. It's rude to say no.
Yeah.
So I have a little bit, and everybody's kind of like, "How is it?" And I'm like, "Am I just gonna sit here and drink this by myself?" And they're just like, "Yeah, of course." I'm like, "Oh, interesting." So I had a little bit, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm full," But it was funny because, for me in my culture, it's like, well, if someone offers you something, you have to say yes. It's respectful. You drink it, and then it's funny though. It's kind of crazy how cultures are similar but different, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you were talking about when the package that you sent me talked about peeling back the layers when it comes to culture, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you maybe tell me a little bit about that? Because that was kind of a cool talking about need to peel back the layers when it comes to culture, stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. So peeling back the layers has another metaphor,
Okay.
which is about the iceberg.
Okay.
And the iceberg was created by a Professor Edward Hall about 40 years ago, but it's still very applicable today. So if you think about an iceberg, it's like the top you can see, and then most of it is hidden.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? So the top is what we call surface culture.
Okay.
So surface culture is basically like if you go into like Taichung or Tokyo or Shanghai for a week, that's what you're experiencing. It's like your IG feed, right? Your Instagram feed.
Yeah.
But then the deep culture is like, for example, norms, like what are the expectations of how people treat elders, or what are the gender roles, So like even within Northeast Asia, the gender roles in Taiwan are super different from Korea.
Yeah.
Taiwan's a little bit more progressive in terms of equality, yeah?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. And then many other aspects like that, like what are people's expectations about how much personal space, etc. So when you peel back the layers, it basically means that you're encountering different attitudes, values, behaviors, expectations.
Okay.
And then as you're encountering them, you're trying to make sense of the environment that I'm in versus mine, and how can I bridge that?
Okay.
So the goal isn't to like kind of peel back the layers and then replicate yourself like I want to become a person from that culture.
Okay.
But it's being able to be what we call a bridge person.
Okay.
So you can kind of maintain your own identity, but you can sort of, I've said this word already, flex your personality, flex your thinking, flex your behavior, so that the environment that you're in, people feel warm, receptive, and comfortable communicating with you.
Okay.
And this doesn't necessarily apply to someone who's like moving to a foreign country.
Okay.
it can also apply to someone who needs to communicate with many different people in one room. For example, you here at the restaurant, or now a lot of people since COVID, they've become sort of cross-functional teams. So they're working on Zoom or on Microsoft Teams every day. And, okay, we'll get the project done. The deadline is Tuesday by 5 p.m. So if you have a person from the US, Taiwan, and Germany, like the Taiwanese person will probably send it early, right?
Okay, yeah.
And then like everyone's gonna sort of have a different reaction to what by 5 p.m. on Tuesday means. So
of course, yeah,
sort of understanding what that means and then being a little bit more sensitive and trying to avoid making stereotypical judgments or doing the thing that a lot of us do is like, oh, Taiwanese are all just like that, or Americans are all just like that.
Yeah.
But rather trying to say, oh, that's interesting. Like, why do they think that, or why does she respond that way? And then from there, you can try and understand, like, oh, is it a universal behavior, or is it a national behavior, or is it an individual personality trait?
That's cool because yes, like I was mentioning, Germans, right? Like I have a few German friends. Not all of them are the stereotypical German, right?
Yeah.
Some of them are quite shy, which is the stereotype is they're not. They're kind of direct, right? Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool because you will meet the individual person who's very different, especially here. I think.
Yeah.
I think that were you to maybe go to Germany, you will meet a lot of obviously Germans, but maybe the ones that have been traveling here, that maybe they've changed a little bit as well. I would say they've been kind of influenced by other cultures. I personally myself grew up as like a very, very like introverted person.
Okay.
And coming out here alone in my early 20s, I was like, I have to do something different. It'd be like a Taiwanese going to Canada or the States, and just being like this quiet person. I thought, I have to do something different because I got to come out of the shell a little bit, or else I'm going to be going home in like a year, right? So yeah, I ended up pushing myself out to get out of the comfort zone a little bit, and then now I have to talk to people all day, which is kind of crazy. Yeah,
that is great. Great. It's really fantastic to just whatever personality you have to push yourself to get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
can really kind of expand your borders, right?
Yeah. Do you have any tips for the Taiwanese that are like, hey, you know what? I have a lot of Taiwanese friends that are quite shy.
Okay.
So do you have any tips for some of the maybe introverted Taiwanese person?
About like communicating.
Yeah, about communicating because, like for example, I had Alan on, and he was saying that people if they're applying for a job, they don't want to keep pushing, saying like for me that's too buhaoisi to keep saying, hey, did I get the job? Did I get the job?
That's
Whereas us, we're like, we would see that as this guy really wants the job. This guy really wants to work. But a Taiwanese person would be like, oh, I don't want to bother them. So something like that. Yeah. Do you have any tips for something like that?
Yeah, like if you want to take it from a linguistic perspective, like on a language level, I think just don't worry so much about everything that you learned at school and whether you're doing a good job or not, because most people, like native language speakers or just someone who's speaking second language English, they don't really care so much about like whether your grammar or the vocabulary you're using is like perfect. They care more about like the human interaction, right?
Okay.
So I'd say first of all, just do your best and try to be natural. Another suggestion I would have is when there's a small talk conversation going on, try to use open-ended questions.
Okay.
A lot of Taiwanese will often use closed-ended questions. So, for example, if I say to you, so do you like coffee or tea? Then you only have very limited options, and then you're going to give me like a 1 or 2 word answer.
Yeah.
But if I say, oh, Eddie, so what drinks do you like? Or what do you enjoy drinking? Or do you have any like hobbies related to drinks?
Yeah.
Then there's an opportunity for you to share with me a lot more.
Okay.
And actually that gives me less pressure because you're speaking and I have time to like listen and then also start formulating my next question.
Okay.
So my suggestion would be try to use those more open-ended questions.
Nice.
And then instead of sort of feeling uncomfortable about how to ask the next question, just listen deeply take one thing from what the other person just said,
Yeah.
and then extract that and use it as your follow-up question.
Okay.
And then also, to avoid a kind of like interview style format,
Sure.
also share back like what you think or your own experience is about that topic.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean that you have to be an expert. Like if you really like surfing and I know nothing about surfing,
Yeah.
there's no need for me to feel uncomfortable about the fact that I don't know, because I can still talk about my love of water or how I love to watch that surfing documentary one time.
Okay.
So just kind of relaxing into it and then going with the flow a little bit more.
Okay.
I would suggest would be a really helpful beginning.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome, because I think that I have had quite a few interviews also in Mandarin, and I've had some where, you prepare your 15 topics or whatever, and then, 15 minutes in, you're out of topics. You're like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, yeah, what are we doing here? So definitely not just Taiwanese, people from all over the world. They'll
That's
just
right.
come out and be like, coffee. Okay, just coffee. Yeah. So that's hilarious. Yeah. Let's look at some pictures.
Yeah.
Want to look at some pictures?
Sure,
Yeah. Okay.
let's do
Cool.
it.
So let's pull some up here.
Okay.
So maybe you can tell me what's happening here. That was from your post, right?
Oh yeah, that's from
So
a
cool.
LinkedIn post. Yeah, so this summer we hiked up to the summit of Yushan Jade Mountain,
Beautiful.
which is the highest peak in Northeast Asia, actually.
know that.
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
highest peak in Northeast Asia, and you know how hot it was in summer. That's in July. Look at the down jacket I'm wearing. So it's
Wow. Okay.
it's pretty cold up there. So we hiked up the first day and stayed at base camp, and then that's at at dawn. So maybe just around 6 a.m. So we got up at 2:30 a.m. and hiked up.
Is there like cabins or something? Did you stay in there? Or did
Yeah.
you go up and down? Or?
Yeah, at base camp there's a cabin.
Okay.
But then like that summit, it's just basically like sheer rock. So you just go up, you kind of enjoy the sunrise. You do the photo thing, and
Okay,
then
yeah.
and then you hike down back to the base camp.
So cool.
It is
Very
Jade
cool.
Mountain. It wasn't on my bucket list, but I really recommend it to anyone
Okay.
who likes the outdoors.
So you're
It's
like an
amazing.
avid hiker then, or?
Yeah, I am, but my,
Okay.
my first love is the ocean. So
Oh, okay.
I really do. I went to Pingdong this summer. I
Oh,
just
nice.
love hanging out by the beach.
Okay,
But I
beautiful.
love nature.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Well, Taiwan, the cool thing about here is, in the winter you can come up here and be snow in the mountains at the top of them, and then you can drive to Kending and go to the beach, and it's in 5 or 6 hours. It's really cool. I love it.
It
Yeah.
is cool. It's easy to get there.
It's beautiful. I
Yeah.
love It's great. Let's look at another picture here.
Yeah, so this is kind of what I do a lot. So this is a facilitation about cultural intelligence.
Okay.
So this particular photo was actually at the Taiwan Academy for Banking and Finance.
Okay.
They have a IDDP, International Talent Development Program, where
Okay.
they invite a small group of financial professionals working in various banks in Taiwan
Okay.
who will be representing the banks abroad. Like maybe
Oh.
they'll become the Paris bank manager or whatever.
Okay.
So they have like a 6-month course where they do lots of training on various topics.
Awesome.
And one of the topics was about intercultural communication.
Okay.
So I was really happy to be invited back. So that's my second year there. Yeah.
Okay, that's beautiful. And how's the reaction to like you coming out saying, okay, I want to teach you about cultural EQ?
Yeah.
Like, how's the reaction from everybody? I guess it's probably mostly Taiwanese related, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, how's the reaction to people? Do they feel like, yeah, I do need to learn about other people's culture, or do they think, no, I don't need to learn that? I'm just out of curiosity.
Yeah, most people don't think they need to learn it, and
yeah.
most organizations don't think it's something worth investing in.
Okay.
So most of the clients and companies that I'm working with, they have serious pain points. So they basically did the research about why a project or why a cross-cultural collaboration failed.
Okay.
And they were sensitive enough to notice that a lot of it was about communication. Or people saying like, oh, we just have cultural differences, or et cetera. So usually, we come in at that stage.
Okay. Okay.
But the IDDP program is really focused on sending all of these people out to all over the world.
Okay.
And there's a couple of really smart people at the Academy for Banking and Finance that
Okay.
have that awareness already because
Okay.
they have a lot of international experience themselves.
Okay.
So I would say it just takes you to have a little bit of experience to realize it's important. But for the people in the workshop, like the participants, I don't really begin the workshop with theory or kind of telling them what we're going to learn. I usually set it up with describing a scenario
Oh, beautiful.
and then getting them to figure out possible solutions. And then after we've kind of done more of a practical-based exercise, then we can draw some insights from that situation. And then they realize, oh, actually there are skills that I could develop to become more successful in this situation.
Okay. Okay.
So then once we've kind of had that awareness and then we facilitate other people's having that realization instead of me telling them, then it becomes a lot easier to kind of bring that in.
Okay. Okay. I think every company, every organization, I think it's important. Right?
Yeah.
Like even here, just a small restaurant. I mean, for example, I've had staff, customers will say, "Oh, do you guys have guacamole today?" And if we don't, because sometimes the avocados are not ripe or we run out or something, and I'll be like, "Oh, sorry, we just ran out. The ones we have are not ripe, so they'll be bitter," or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Okay, cool." Whereas some of the previous staff would just be like, "No."
Yeah. And then you're like, why?
And then you're like, "Well," and then the person could also feel like upset, like
Yeah.
male, and just walk away.
That's right.
Like, whoa, you don't want to talk to me, you don't want to serve me, I'm not coming back here.
That's
like
right.
it just builds up. It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's happened.
That's a
We've-
great example.
We've lost people because of you get like a 1-star review, like, "Oh, the waitress is really rude," but actually she was just saying there isn't any, but maybe her skill wasn't be like, "Oh, this is what happened." They'd be like, "No. Can I have do you have a refill on this?" "No." It's like, "Oh, well, okay, yeah." It's happened many times, so we have to be like, "No, don't say like no." Be like, explain something. Yeah, we try. It's tough. It's tough. Let's pull up another one.
I love that. The context is so important.
Yeah, it's just like, "No, male, male, male," and you just walk away. Like, whoa, because it's busy. They just
Yeah.
kind of, and then the person's like, "Whoa, Well, this place is Hanxiong. This place is not a good place.
Cold.
It's a cold place,
Yeah.
right?" Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool though. This is another one, I believe, right? Another
Oh, yeah.
course or
Yeah, so there's this really cool e-learning platform in Taiwan called Hahao.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. And 2 years ago, with another Taiwanese company, CLA, and I collaborated to make a intercultural communication for business professionals e-learning video on Hahao.
Okay.
And then this year, Haha had an event for HR professionals to kind of understand how to bring in e-learning as part of their learning and development
Nice.
packages.
Okay.
And they invited me to come and talk about my video. And so in that picture, that's the participants kind of taking a look at an introduction.
Is it a university class? I mean, I mean, I can only see the back
Oh,
of heads, but
yeah,
they look
yeah.
young. Yeah, high school, or is it just a mixed aged? I guess.
Yeah, no, it's mixed ages.
Okay,
It was
okay,
kind of
okay.
like a professional networking
beautiful.
event.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really cool. Really
Yeah.
cool. Let me grab another one here.
Yeah.
Boom. Letter of appreciation.
Oh, yeah. So that's from a Taiwanese cram school, Bushiban.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they have about 8 locations in various places in Taipei. I think they
Okay.
have one in Tianmu.
Okay.
And they have a huge international as well as Taiwanese staff. So they invited me to come in first to do a workshop on intercultural communication for the Taiwanese staff about how to communicate better with their foreign coworkers,
Yeah.
international coworkers. And then a month later, they invited me back to have a workshop with the international teachers
Okay.
on how to adjust certain aspects of their communication style to have better relationships with their Taiwanese coworkers.
Okay.
So that was
Super important. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
super important. Yeah.
Yeah, super important. Because again, I when I taught here for the first few times, I remember on payday, I was teaching English. This was a long time ago. On my first payday, they ordered pizza, and they're just like, we got pizza for the 50 or the 80 kids or whatever, and the teachers and everything. They got a bunch of pizzas from Pizza Hut. And then they're like, oh, and you pay because you're the foreign teacher. And I was like, oh, really? And they're like, yeah, so it's payday. So they had like my envelope. So they took money. They just paid for it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And obviously that's not normal, but it was the first school I was at. It's like, yeah, that's normal. On payday, the foreign teacher pays for pizza for everybody. I thought, okay, interesting. So it was pretty funny. Yeah. It was at the time I was shocked, but now it's hilarious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it seems you were pretty chill in your
I was like,
response.
it's okay. Yeah, it was pretty funny. Yeah. Another picture here.
Okay.
Boom.
Yeah, so I've been working with this semiconductor company that right now they're moving into all areas of the world. So tomorrow morning I have a teacher training with some trainers who are going to be working in the Japan facility.
Awesome.
And then next week I'm going to their US facility.
Okay, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it's going to be working with the Taiwanese there and also the Americans. And yeah, that's a really exciting sort of client I have because they're...
that's huge. Congrats on that. That's
thank
fantastic.
You.
Yeah. Everybody is like, hey, everybody wants to work at TSMC, right? Or whatever. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Let's next one. Here we go. Yeah.
So this was a, what do you call that? A forum on DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion.
Okay.
And intercultural communication. And the guy in the middle is the founder of the training company CLN.
Okay.
And then the woman on the right was the facilitator. And she was asking us to share our thoughts on incorporating intercultural communication in learning and development for a lot of the global companies in Taiwan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. I think it's great that the larger companies are noticing this.
Yeah.
Because, if you put a plant in Taiwan, you put one in Japan, it's going to be a very different culture.
Yeah.
You put one in Texas or Arizona or whatever, it's going to be a different culture.
That's
you
right.
put one in Mexico City, it's going to be a different culture. So I think that it's really cool. Keep it up. It's so cool.
Oh, thank you.
I love that. Yeah. A couple more. I got 2 more pictures here.
Oh, sure. So I love working with Nike. It's a great organization. So I work with some of their senior leaders on communication skills, also like developing presence, which is a big thing when you have a lot of online meetings.
Yeah.
And then also that was, I think, a couple of months ago, we had a variety of workshops face-to-face in the Taipei office, and then also for the Asia Pacific region on like negotiation and other soft skills. So that was a lot of fun. I really like their culture. They're really energetic and great people.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. Got one more picture here.
Okay.
Boom.
Oh yeah. So that's just a little bit about me. Thanks for picking that up.
Sure, it's a cool one. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So elephantcommunications.com is my website, and then this is just kind of some services that I offer my one-on-one clients.
Okay.
So sometimes clients who would like to work with me, they connect with my online platform through that discovery call link.
Okay.
So they can set up a discovery call, and then we just figure out, where they're at and what they're looking to do and how I can maybe help, and then if it works out, then we can move forward.
And you can have a customer from anywhere, really, in the world, or any client. Yeah.
Any client, as long as I feel like I can benefit them.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's really important to sort of do a needs analysis.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so, how can people find you if they want to find you? Just go to your website, or what's the best way?
Yeah. So elephantcommunications.com is my website. You can find me there, and then also Michelle Bradley is the name I use. It's my real name on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So, I really like LinkedIn. I've made a lot of great friends there and professional connections. They can find me there too.
Yeah, I think that LinkedIn is it's like a pretty professional feeling version of social media, right? Like it's a really good connector. I think. Yeah, it's great. I followed you, so it's pretty cool.
Thank you. I did too. I followed you today too.
I appreciate it. That's so awesome. Do you have anything you want to add before I buy you some dinner here and we call it?
Oh, that's really nice.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, I just want to 鼓励大家, just to encourage everyone, if you're in Taiwan and you're thinking of going abroad, or you want to connect more with friends from other countries, or you're from another country and you've been living in Taiwan, the more you can kind of learn about yourself, like having the self-awareness, and then practicing the EQ, especially like the empathy, asking open-ended questions, and taking the time to really learn and be curious about the environment that you're in or the people that you're working with. I think it really pays off. So everyone has different careers, different paths, but applying sort of some of the principles of cultural EQ to your life will have a lot of benefit.
Beautiful.
So yeah, if you're interested in books to read or things like that, just get in touch with me. I'd be happy to share more.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie.
Awesome. It was really cool to meet you, and great story. We'll do some more chatting in a minute.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for watching. elephantcommunications.com if you guys are curious, or on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Or message me and I will connect you. Whatever's easiest for you. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you everybody for watching Eddie's show. We feel lonely